Thank you again, everyone, for joining. While we wait a couple of more minutes to start the session, can I request everyone to change your name to your name and your organization's name, please? Thank you so much for joining us. We'll start in a couple of minutes. Thank you for already starting the introductions on chat. I think there's been tech glitch that I wanted to address. I think a lot of people are entering by the name of Savira. So if you could just rename yourself to your name and your organization's name, and continue the conversation on chat. We'll just start in a couple of minutes. We'll start by 3-4. Thank you so much. Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Hello and welcome. If I can record, yes, thank you so much. Hello and welcome, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for taking the time to join us for the session today. We welcome you to the 10 to 19 Dastra Adolescent Collaborative session at the Glocal Evaluation Week 2022. Now, in its fourth edition, this year, the Global Evaluation Initiative, in collaboration with JPAL South Asia, have organized the week for their partners like us to host virtual M&E knowledge exchange and network events. As part of this initiative, 10 to 19 is hosting today's session called Measure for Impact, Landscaping Learnings and Insights on Impact Measurement, Evaluation, Efforts, and Approaches in the field of adolescent health and well-being. Now, I know that's a big name to have, but before we move forward, we have to take you through some of the principles of the session and get a few housekeeping announcements out of the way. So if I could just direct your attention to some house guidelines that will just come on screen. Okay, so quickly walking through some of the health guidelines. If you have any trouble with technology or you suddenly drop off, the link will be live throughout. So feel free to join back in. If you still face further issues, you can contact anyone with the name tag as Dastra. Please ensure your microphones are muted throughout so as to not create disturbance for the ones speaking. The session will be recorded, it will be tweeted live, and it will be live streamed. And I hope that's fine with everyone. Please do change your names due to tech issues. I think multiple people have joined by the same name. So request you to also change your name and add your organization. We do have young people joining the group and the discussion as well. So we will be posting our child policy, protection policy in chat as well. And by being part of this meeting, we expect you to adhere by it as well, as we hope for this to be a safe space for everyone. Thank you so much for projecting the house rules. We have a great session lined up for you, so let us get straight into it. I'm Yashi Jain, and I'm part of the 10 to 19 Dasta Adolescents Collaborative team. 10 to 19 is a multi-stakeholder platform that accelerates adolescent-first approaches with funders, civil society, and the government. A platform driven by outcomes around economic well-being, education, agency, and health to engage a critical mass of 15 million adolescents in India, especially girls, to thrive and achieve their full potential. We aim to elevate their voices in leadership, build knowledge and networks, mobilize greater resources, and enable policy improvements to contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals 2030. This session is the latest installment of the 10 to 19 Collaborative's continued pursuit to bring forth learning circles and forums to ensure that we create spaces for various stakeholders in the sector to come together and share promising practices, challenges, insights, so we learn and grow and move towards our shared goals together. This year itself, we've organized 2 such sessions as part of the Dasta Philanthropy Week and the School World Forum that many of you might have been a part of. Now, over the course of the last 5 years of our implementation as part of the collaborative, we've always ensured we build and maintain systems of accountability towards our outcomes that is in line with our participatory and collaborative ethos. In our journey ahead as well, as we continue to mobilize resources, build knowledge, convince various stakeholders, build our youth leaders, and lead the narrative change, our effort will always be to be more and more participatory in our approach. Now, throughout this journey, we've interacted with various stakeholders like yourselves, and we've all had various learnings that we will be sharing here today. Now, of course, these are by no means the only right way to do a certain thing, but this is just an attempt to start the conversation around important practices and approaches that all of us want to achieve. Now, with this backdrop, we would like to welcome all of you again to today's session, and we hope to collectively explore trends, approaches, knowledge, and innovative practices, fostering and influencing an engaged and informed community of learners. So to quickly give you a sense and flavor of what you will be getting in the session, over the course of the conversation, we want each of us to be able to use this session to have dialogues. So please use the chat feature to ask questions, share your perspectives. Anything is welcome here. This is a learning community, so please share, chat, and converse. I do want to reiterate that this is a safe space for us to learn together. So please be respectful of all diverse opinions, mindful of others speaking, and we hope you'll extend empathy and consideration to one another. If there's any reference to a resource a speaker is speaking to and is talking about that you're interested in, please do let us know in chat and we'll make sure we send it across to you after. Finally, I wanted to just acknowledge everyone's participation and dedication towards this common agenda that we're all working towards. We truly appreciate this community for committing to collectively learning and unlearning. Now, as you can see, we have an action-packed agenda, and without more delay, I just want to dive straight in. So with that, can I invite my first speaker, Dr. Chidam, who is a development professional with 25 plus years of experience in the evaluation space, having worked with 20 plus participatory evaluation and impact assessment studies of large development programs for national and international agencies. Thank you, Dr. Chidam, for really joining us today and giving us your time and sharing valuable insights with us. To really start this discussion, what I wanted to get your perspective on, Dr. Chidam, was if you could break down what it really means to be participatory and collaborative when we talk about measurement, evaluation, and learning approaches. Not just broadly, but also in the space of adolescent health and well-being space, right? What does it mean to be participatory and collaborative? And when you're defining and demystifying this for us, can you also highlight challenges that you've seen that have emerged and really talk a little bit about how we should be looking at this and what it really means? What is the essence of being participatory and collaborative in this space? So over to you, Dr. Chidam.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much for the Dasra team for inviting me to be part of these initiatives. It's been great to be part of this dialogue and discussions, because this is one of my favorite topic participatory evaluation is one of my favorite topic. And I'm glad that, I got to get a chance to come and share my few thoughts and my experience that I have on this field. So let me, you ask me to define it. Let me try my best to know whatever I, gathered understanding and experience working with this approach. Let me try to, I think, when you talk about the participatory approach, particularly participatory evaluation approach is not a new, and it has been used for several decades. But however, involving youth and adolescents in the evaluation process is a new field of inquiry, because as it has been recognized as, some of them or used it, recognized as essential to include their values, identities, culture, and contextual dimensions in the evaluation process. So it has been highly, I think some of the evaluations, especially done it in the Western countries, is been a lot of experience has been highlighted that it needs to be kind of youth-driven participatory evaluation approach. So what it means, youth-driven participatory evaluation means is an approach that engages youth and adolescents in evaluating programs, organizations, and systems that aim to address their needs. So it, even to simplify it, it is a kind of interactive evaluation process that involves youth as an active partners in all stages of evaluations. That is including designing the evaluation, conducting, analyzing the data, which is such a process enables them to have a voice in the knowledge productions, which the knowledge generally brings out the concerns and issues of that impacts their life. So that's that is where the kind of approach is being very, very unique and different, and even within the participate approach itself, because, and I think it's every evaluation is a context specific and cultural specific, and also it's a kind of according to different segments, and youth is one of the segment that it needs a special attention and focus when you to talk about participatory approaches. I think there are different approaches within youth participatory evaluation, and some are fully youth driven, and also some are followed kind of partnership with adults, youth and adults, when evaluating programs. I think when it comes to youth driven model, so I think generally it happens the potential youths are identified and trained on evaluation designs, data collections, and analysis by outside experts. And then the youth is conduct the evaluations afterwards, maybe with the support of little support from the outsider. When it comes to adult youth partnership model is where both youth and adult evaluators engage equally in the whole process of evaluations. I think these are the two broad. There are maybe sub models within that, but I think these are the two broad models of youth participatory evaluation approaches that I've been engaged with. So I think so using such approaches also helps to gain many benefits, including kind of better access to the youth beneficiary who are traditionally not accessible. But and then involving youth as an evaluator, it helps to identify those people underrepresented, because I think these people understand their living context. So it helps this youth evaluator to identify and reach out to those, and also it helps to better access, better understand the data, because youth are more effectively get irrelevant informations compared to the adults, because they understand better about their background. And also, it helps to create a kind of, youth-friendly tools that uses a language of youth. Then again, that helps to get a kind of quality data and valued informations, which is often important to use the findings later on. And also then, because youth is involved as an evaluator and their inputs in design and collecting data, and it helps to be the program can be stronger and more appropriate and better address the needs of the youth based on the findings. And also, it's not just only it benefits youth and the quality of research, but also it helps to the organization who's engaged in implementing programs and participating in the evaluations. It also helps to transform the organization culture more often that, because if you engage in a deeper involvement, but it also enables the move to the organizations more towards youth oriented in any of the implementations they do, and also participatory oriented in most of the approaches, including the implementations. So,
can you share a little bit about the challenges, Dr. Chidam? Can you share a little bit?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to come to know. Though these are the benefits, but the thing is that all the youth-driven participatory approach can help you to evaluate better programs, but when it comes to measuring impacts and improving impacts, and so this is where the problem it is. So because often evaluations depends upon the good project design. So the good project design is often not considered as a participatory design. So for example, many of the projects, whether in India and other places, so it's all designed based on the kind of expertise knowledge, and or maybe at the most using macro level data. So the project is not in a participatory mode in terms of investing in assessing the needs, in involving the youth, and also analyzing the problem and designing in participation of youth. So when it is the design is not in a kind of good quality, and then because the evaluation also not in a good quality, you can't even have whatever the approach that you use, a participatory this and that, the result that you bring out, it won't be effective because the evaluation depends upon the design of the project. So because indicators and everything set at the front. So
you're saying when we are designing the project, that's when it really starts. That's when we should be participatory, because if the design's not participatory, how will the evaluation process really be participatory? It's really interesting. Sorry, Dr. Chidam, again interrupting. Just one more minute to go. So if you could just summarize some of your points around these challenges, I think would be interesting to hear from you.
I think the challenges is for two things. Even the evaluations, participatory evaluations, still is not 100% that people follow engaging youth. That is several reasons to it, and I wanted to highlight the issues with the participatory project design, because that's for me is the foundation. So I wanted to highlight the issues associated with, because there are many constraints. One of them is the donor have their limited time and not allocate resources for preparing, the participatory program proposals, and also they don't want to have, they have a soft corner not to do, pressure or trouble the NGOs to prepare such a project design. And also the people who are preparing the project design also have a lot of issues in terms of the fund and also the capacity to prepare such participatory project designs, and also more often that they use knowledge expertise, expert knowledges, and they don't want to go into detailed needs assessment. So I think those are the challenges. But I think if you could, but many donor organizations come forward to invest money and resources on NGOs to develop such project designs.
Well, it'll be interesting. We do have donors in the room today, where we'll just be going into the next panel. So it'll actually be interesting to hear from them as well in terms of the challenges that you are identifying here. So, sorry, Dr. Chidam, I'm already coming off as a very hard moderator, but I will have to pause and move on.
I'm happy to answer it on the
chat. Exactly. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And this is a cue to all of our following panelists as well, just to be on time. But thank you, Dr. Chidam. I think it was really helpful how you laid out, the two broad approaches, as well as the kind of tools that's really needed and how we need to think of it in a spectrum rather than just in a silo. So that was really helpful. I think with that, it just really demystifies and really simplifies what the importance of being participatory and collaborative is. I'll move on to my next panel then. We have a sub-panel joining us today. We have, like you can see, we have Shantanu Rao, Policy Associate from JPAL South Asia, a global research center informed by scientific evidence. We have Dr. Kim, founder of Data Boom, a research and comms agency that believes powerful insights can change the world. We have Abhinav Kumar, manager, Children's Investment Fund Foundation, a global fund seeking to transform lives of children and adolescents. We have Shailja Mehta, director of 10 to 19 Lustra Adolescents Collaborative. And we have Sabah Rahmani, member of the Young People Advisory Group of the Collaborative. I would now like to just call upon this first set of panelists, who are representatives, as you can see, from various stakeholder groups, to talk about how we can enable systems to be more participatory. As what we're really seeking here is a meaningful collaboration between citizens and local community on the one hand, and systems and local governance like government, funders, and NGOs on the other hand. So if we can really have this group together come as various perspectives come in, talk a little bit from your perspective on how we can do it. What are some practices in which that's already being done? What are some transferable principles that you have seen work? Maybe some challenges as well that we are together trying to solve for. So I'll just go around the room and we can gather some really interesting insights, right? So thank you really for joining us. I would like to first talk to you, Shantanu, and request you to speak a little bit about the importance of conducting research for improving outcomes for adolescents, and the importance of really involving community in the research that you've done. So if you could just shed light a little bit on that.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Yashi. And thanks to Dasra for organizing this panel and for inviting Jaypal to actually speak. It's an honor. I'm not going to spend too much time on introductions because I'm scared to not to go over time. And yeah, she's giving me a threatening smile right now. But just to set some context, as Yashi has already mentioned at the beginning, it's really important to actually do research to understand what works to improve outcomes for adolescents. And this is especially the case for a country like India, where 20% of the population is actually made up of the adolescent group. And what's important to point out here is that even though development is so crucial at the stage of adolescence, even then many vulnerabilities and many needs of adolescents remain underserved and insufficiently provided for. And this is especially the case for adolescent girls, wherein they still are at risk for early marriages, early pregnancies, and this can potentially increase their dependence on men in the future. It can pose an hindrance to their human capital investment and actually decrease their opportunities and chances to enter and participate in the workforce. And so at this point, it really becomes important to look at how, say, factors like norms, agency, and empowerment actually underpin all of these outcomes and actually contribute to these outcomes across these sectors. And so I'll just spend a little bit of time teasing out that relationship a little bit, and then talk about how participatory approaches could actually come in to help refine our understanding of how to actually measure impact in this. So when we think of norms, we think about those informal and unsaid rules that actually impose constraints on behaviors and activities. We think of agency as one's ability to make meaningful decisions and choices and act on them, and empowerment as the process through which people actually acquire this ability to make decisions. Now, it's important to think about these three constructs when thinking about adolescent outcomes, especially through a gender lens, because social constraints created through norms can actually create hindrances to girls' agency and empowerment. So for instance, norms about gender roles in the household could actually limit a girl's decision-making power about decisions that pertain directly to her. So for instance, about whether she wants to get married, if at all, when she wants to have children, if at all, when she wants to enter the workforce, etc. And so it becomes important to really look at how we could influence agency, norms, and empowerment to actually improve outcomes across, say, sexual and reproductive health, labor, etc. And this is where something like a participatory approach would come in, because we need to acknowledge that measuring something like empowerment, agency, and norms is very, very complex. They are almost black boxes of like multi-dimensional indicators, and they will always be unique to the person that you are considering and the region or context in which they are coming from. And here is where collaborating with and actually increasing creating repeated opportunities to actually interact and learn from the adolescent groups that we're working with really creates like a holistic understanding of what empowerment, agency, norms look like in that specific context, what the barriers to these constructs are, how to say introduce programs that could actually improve or overcome these barriers, and how to eventually measure improvements as well. And so maybe I can take you through an example of a JPAL affiliated evaluation, where our affiliated professors were looking to evaluate a conditional incentive program, as well as an adolescent empowerment program to reduce adolescent pregnancy, teenage marriages, and improve educational attainment for girls in rural Bangladesh. And so this adolescent empowerment program, it was called Kishori Kontha, and it was designed to provide empowerment lessons to young girls after school in community centers. And this was delivered by peer mentors. The conditional incentive program was actually delivering cooking oil to families who had unmarried daughters within the age group of 15 to 17. And what's crucial to note here is that the value of this cooking oil was calibrated to offset the higher price of dowry as girls increase in age. And so through the formative research period, the researchers actually conducted tons and a whole suite of interviews with young women from this area from rural Bangladesh to actually understand the context a little bit better. So they can not only curate the empowerment program to suit what empowerment really means, but they could actually align their measurement indicators of these constructs to what it actually looks like in rural Bangladesh. So to give you an example of this, a common indicator of empowerment is whether, especially gendered empowerment, is whether a young girl can actually travel outside of her home around the community alone. And through these interviews, the researchers really realized that measuring this wouldn't be as simple or as straightforward as you might think it would be, because many of the girls talked about how they weren't able to travel alone at all, but at the same time talked about how many times they go alone to school often. And so what really came out from this is that it's not so much whether they can travel alone or not, but what they're traveling for and for what purpose it serves. So sure, they were definitely allowed to travel alone to school, but when it came to traveling to local fairs, that's something they weren't allowed to do at all. So to really capture that nuance and to measure mobility with respect to empowerment, the researchers really asked a ton of questions, asking whether girls were allowed to travel alone to different parts of the community, some of which involved areas that had no larger than life value. It just was valuable in terms of a utility to the girl themselves.
Sorry, Shantanu, I'm going to come in a little bit, but it was really helpful how you exemplified it, right? I think really nice examples are going to come through this discussion, and it really breaks it down, I would say.
Yeah.
What you said about, how the nuances of capturing agency, environment, and norms is really where participatory approaches really comes through.
Exactly.
So I think that was really interesting to hear. So thank you, Shantanu, for sharing. And I think more examples can flow, and you can continue to share examples on chat as well. But Dr. Kim, I would like to move talking to you a little bit about, as a global agency that works with NGO partners to really build tools, mechanism, methodologies, approaches on collecting data and information of the work that we're doing. How have you seen, what has been your learnings to make processes more accessible? The tools that you design, how have you seen that we can make those participatory? Can you shed a little bit of light on that?
Sure, of course. Thanks so much. Yeah, I think it's really important to meet youth where they are. And youth are online and they're using tech in most places. And so a lot of the most interesting projects that we've been working on and supporting our clients on involve technology. And I think also not to be mystified by the tech, but also, as the previous speakers have talked about, the constructs, the things we want to explore, leveraging youth's voices, it's very complicated, and we're starting to get into very sensitive areas. And so you need to build trust with youth as you roll out these studies. And so previous speakers have talked about including youth in all phases, and I totally agree, in the design, in the implementation, and I would say also in the interpretation. And I think it's important to consider multiple touch points with youth and panel designs so that you can establish trust and a relationship and build up to more sensitive topics and things that require deeper exploration. And having established relationships will also help you track down youth if you lose them, because they can be a little fickle. They can move around, they can change cell phone services, they can drop out of school, so and entertaining some other things outside of a survey, a focus group sort of box, thinking outside of the box. And a few of our partners and clients that I wanted to highlight that do some really interesting work, and I'll put their links in the chat after. MTV Staying Alive Foundation. So they do great campaigns. They're very polished. They use a soap opera format and engaging storylines to promote behavior change. In India, this is called Nished. Shuga is the biggest of the campaigns. And we worked with them to do customizable dashboards. And I really love these dashboards because they elevate youth's experience and voice. So not only do we see how youth are consuming the media that MTV Staying Alive produces, but we can also see what they think about it, especially through social media comments and through polling data. And then we can also triangulate and link things about their journey to get the kinds of services and support that they need. So looking at hotline and referral data, actually service level data, and peer education, and triangulate it and try to get a sense of if their needs are being met, and then what do they tell us about what they're learning, and maybe where there are gaps, if something isn't resonating, if they've misunderstood something, so that the organization can course correct. And I also am really intrigued with the idea of using polling data, because while it's not a generalizable sample, it is a lot of youth that can be polled very quickly and give you real-time data that implementers can then use quickly to course correct. Another organization that I think does really nice work is Girl Effect and their TEGAs. And TEGAs are technology-enabled girl ambassadors. And they use mobile-based technology to collect real-time insights on youth. They can interview girls, boys, adults, community leaders via mobile phones. And it's a girl talk method. It's really designed for girl on girl. And like the previous speakers have said, to really use that insight to get at those challenging constructs and ideas. And you can use it for formative research, concept testing, monitoring, and evaluation. So you can see how they're using it across the course of data collection and implementation.
That's really interesting, Dr. Kim. I think, sorry, just to come in,
Sure.
I think of the dashboards that you're talking about, or even the programs that you're talking about, it'll also be very useful to just maybe look at them, right? So if you could just also share some of those links and really examples with us, will be really useful to go through them. And what's interesting about what you said is technology, the role that tech can play in all of this, and the trust aspects. So really, the two T's I think are really important here. And so thank you. I'm sorry, I'll have to move on.
Okay, thank you,
Abhinav. But thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks
Dr.
so much.
Kim. Abhinav, just coming to you now. You're hearing Dr. Kim, Shantanu, everyone talk about the importance of this and how some of this has been done. From an M&E perspective, as a M&E person in the funder space, how can we enable this in the real world according to you? Like, we've been hearing and seeing trends and importance of these approaches, right? So how can funders champion this really? Can you bring in a little bit of the funder perspective into the discussion here? And can you share a little bit of how funders are starting to move in that direction, and talk a little bit about that?
Thank you, Yashi, and really grateful to entire Dasra team for this opportunity. Feel privileged to be here for this discussion. So would like to begin with a quote by Professor Edward Deming, who said that in God we trust, everyone else must bring data. But all this data needs to be transformed into information, and then information needs to be transformed into knowledge, and knowledge needs to be transformed into wisdom. That is only possible if we are making sure that those uptakes are happening. And for that, we need all sort of inclusiveness and participatory approach. So be it the intervention or evaluation, keeping things participatory would really help. Now, moving on the evaluation part specifically, I would like to agree with what Professor Chidam and Shantanu has mentioned. Definitely, I think doing some sort of formative research that we have been doing to design things better, to understand the characteristics and the real problem, so that we are tracking the real kind of indicator rather than just being happy about what has been thought in closed AC rooms, and then we are chasing those indicators. So that is definitely that we have been doing. Grateful to Dr. Kim also to talk about MTV Nisheth and Girl Effect. We were part of both the interventions in recent past. But yeah, I would say that so far as participative evaluation is concerned, I think this needs to be broken down into different levels, right? Because we are working with different stakeholders. So from SIF perspective, I would say that our main focus is to keep the evaluation partner as local as possible. And that is the first step towards making it inclusive and participative, who understands the context and situation well, and then also working with the program partner in sync with that evaluation partner. So we are always trying to share the data collection tool or the way things would progress with them. And then of course I would say the real owners of the intervention, the community. So definitely we need to see them as the owner of the intervention rather than just a mere beneficiary. So for that, just wanted to share one example that one of the adolescent-based projects we had in Rajasthan, we identified, with the help of our evaluation partner, identified youth champions who were actually doing all sort of interactions with the adolescents who were participant of the programs. And we did realize that this is the way forward, because when we are talking about the health related issues that adolescents might be having, it becomes an imperative that they need to talk to someone with whom they can associate it better, right? They can relate better. So if a stranger goes to their place and talks about things which would make them uncomfortable, so I think we are losing the very first point in terms of everything. I mean, the kind of data we would be collecting, it would be completely different what we would have envisaged for. So yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, that is very important. There are some good efforts that we have been putting. And so far as the co-funded investments are concerned, to be honest, I would say it's still somewhat far. We are trying our best to make sure that we are keeping it localized as much as possible, and also making sure that communities are involved in the process of designing the program as well as evaluation part of it.
Right. Thank you, Abhinav, for sharing that perspective. Like you said, in designing and the review of it, right? So I'd like to bring in Shailja at this time. And Shailja, can you share a little bit about, as part of the 10 to 19, the multi-stakeholder platform and collaborator that we have, could you shed light on some key principles that have grounded the collaborative to develop different mechanisms in design and in review processes to be participatory? Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Yashi, for inviting me. And it's great to be on this panel, but a little intimidating because I'm by no means an expert in that sense. But actually, that brings me to the point that I did want to share here. I think what's interesting and what's coming through in our learnings, and some of what I even hear right now on this panel and what we've heard as a growing need, is to debureaucratize or de-hierarchize, if I'm making up words here, this entire piece around evaluation, monitoring, and data. And I completely agree with Kim when she says that we need to meet communities, in this case young people and adolescents, where they are at a time when they are ready to engage and want to, in a space that they are willing to and is comfortable, in a safe and secure manner which encourages them to be able to share practically, really, and honestly. And essentially that will only happen, and I'm not saying anything new, but just reiterating that will only happen if we give the reins of design, implementation, review, governance, and recommendations at various points in a facilitated manner to the young people or to the populations or the communities with whom we are working. And so, for example, to your specific question, Yashi, how are we as 10 to 19 looking at including young people? We have a governance structure, and I know we have some team members here from our youth advisory, young people's advisory boards. We have a youth advisory board for a particular coalition and a young people's advisory board, right? Who is advisors to us, who reviews our strategy, who helps us in the designing of the program. We have Ab Meri Bari, which is a young people-led kind of collective action forum where multiple organizations come together with their community of young people and design tools to collect data to ultimately come up with recommendations of what works or what needs to be changed or shifted around programs, if it's government programs or implementing programs or their own community programs. We have young people who are helping us design the implementation and NGO, implementation work of the organizations that we work with. We have young people and panels of them reviewing what we may have implemented, and also if we're doing dipsticks and assessments, looking at them actually designing the questions to ask. And ultimately, we're also looking at institutionalizing forums where, with kind of key decision makers, should it be policy makers, should it be funders, how can there be a much more kind of formal and significant and not just ad hoc participation on a regularized manner between young people, giving feedback to these policymakers to say this is working, this isn't working, and these groups to be representative groups, to be diverse groups, and to be supported and handheld to be facilitated to build their capacities to be able to even engage and have these conversations in a way that's relevant, constructive, and meaningful for themselves as well as for the different stakeholders that they are working with. So these are just examples to share at every point in different ways, looking at working with the best in class partners who all exist. The beauty is there are many organizations doing fantastic work. All we need to do is be able to leverage their skills, insight, practice, and bring them on board and say, for this need, how do we include young people? Please help, share, measure. And one thing I will say is what's exciting, what I'm most excited about in the collaborative is by us kind of investing in this approach, because we work in a collaborative manner, which is we have a collective of funders, multi-stakeholder approach, players across. We're hoping that across different groups, inter and intra, we're able to imbibe this kind of participative practices, and we're testing it. See, some things we may fail, we may not do it well. There's a next phase to it. But at least then as a whole cohort, a group of us as practitioners, all the way from funders to the young person on the ground, we'll all have collectively worked and tested out different approaches and ways of working and learned from it and shared it as public goods and made very public our mistakes and challenges or our learnings and successes, so that we're all also, like you very rightly said, Yashi, we all should and are a learning community and we should learn from each other. So I'll pause here because I know you're very strict on time. So I'm getting a bit scared. But just to say, I think
Thank you, Shailja.
in all ways, in ways that work for young people where they are at times and in the ways they would like to.
Thank you, Shailja, for really laying that out in terms of how we should do it at all levels. Like you mentioned, we have the Young People Advisory Group, and we have a representative, Saba Rahmani, who's part of our Young People Advisory Group of the collaborative. Saba and I will be chatting a little bit in Hindi. We'll have translations in English as well, and I will translate some of this to Saba as well. Saba, क्या आप थोड़ा शेयर कर सकते हो हमारे साथ कि young people को involve करना जब हम कुछ भी डिजाइन कर रहे हैं या रिव्यू कर रहे हैं तब क्यों इम्पोर्टेंट होता है, और आपके हिसाब से आपके जर्नी में एज ए यंग पीपल एडवाइजरी ग्रुप क्या स्किल्स और क्या चैलेंजेस आप देखे हो जो आपको लगता है हमें सपोर्ट करना चाहिए आपको डिजाइन करने में? सबा, अगर आप थोड़ा शेयर करना चाहो उसके बारे में. थैंक यू.
Thank you for inviting me, Team Dasra. So I am give you a small introduction. So hello, my name is Saba Rahmani. I am from फरुखाबाद, उत्तर प्रदेश, और मैं सोशल इशूज जैसे जेंडर इक्वालिटी, क्लाइमेट चेंज आदि जैसे मुद्दों पर काम करती हूँ, और मैं गर्ल आइकन और यूथ चैंपियन रह चुकी हूँ, और इस समय मैं युवा चैंपियन पीपल एडवाइजरी ग्रुप की एक मेंबर हूँ. सबसे पहले मैं युवाओं की बात करूंगी. हमारे देश में युवा जो हैं, युवा वो हैं जो हमारे देश को आगे ले जा सकते हैं. वो अपनी सोच और काबिलियत से और अपना महत्वपूर्ण योगदान दे सकते हैं देश को आगे बढ़ाने में. पर एक ये समस्या है कि युवाओं की बातों को इतना इम्पोर्टेंस नहीं दिया जाता है, और अगर सुना भी जाता है तो सबसे आखिरी में उनकी बात को सुना जाता है, क्योंकि हमारे पूरे सिस्टम में एक्सपीरियंस लोग भरे पड़े. अगर क्योंकि लोग सोचते हैं कि अगर जब एक्सपीरियंस लोग हैं तो हम लोग क्यों न्यू लोगों की बात सुने या उनसे बात करें। तो पर क्या ये सच में ऐसा है कि हम लोग सब युवाओं की समस्याओं को जानते हैं? लेकिन नहीं, ऐसा नहीं है। युवा लोग हैं, युवा लोग ही अपनी अच्छी तरह जानते हैं कि क्या प्रॉब्लम है, मेन प्रॉब्लम क्या है। बस उन्हें युवाओं को एक प्लेटफॉर्म की जरूरत है कि वो अपने व्यूज को रख सकें, अपनी समस्याओं और अपनी राय जो है सबके सामने रख सकें। जैसे दासरा यंग पीपल एडवाइजरी ग्रुप में हम लोग करते हैं, वहाँ पर हम अपनी समस्याओं को, नए नए आइडियाज को के बारे में बात करते हैं। वहाँ पे हम सरकार की जो नीतियाँ हैं उनको और अच्छे से काम करने के लिए प्रेरित करते हैं, एनजीओ को, फंडर्स को, और अच्छे से किस तरीके से काम किया जाए उसके लिए प्रेरित करते हैं। और ऐसे ही अगर युवाओं के लिए और कई प्लेटफॉर्म्स या प्रोग्राम्स ऐसे ही बनाए जाएं जिसमें उनकी राय के अलावा उनकी स्किल्स जैसे कम्युनिकेशन स्किल हो गई, लीडरशिप और डिसीजन मेकिंग पर भी उतना ही काम किया जाए, तो मेरे हिसाब से युवा समाज में और जहाँ पर भी उनकी राय की जरूरत है अपना और ज्यादा योगदान दे सकते हैं। Thank you.
Thank you, Sabha. Thank you, Sabha, for sharing कि कैसे young people को involve करना जरूरी क्यों है, और भी हम कैसे कर सकते हैं और किस तरह से कर सकते हैं, नॉट सिर्फ रिव्यू के लिए नहीं या सिर्फ क्वेश्चन पूछने के लिए नहीं, बट ऑल्सो कि क्या प्रॉब्लम है वो समझने के लिए भी हमें यंग पीपल को इन्वॉल्व करना चाहिए। क्विकली सबके लिए समराइज करने के लिए, टू समराइज इट फॉर एवरीवन एल्स, Sabha talked a little bit about why it's important to listen to young people, not just when we want to know about what kind of solutions work or what kind of problems work, but really end to end is when we should be listening to young people, and they do have opinions to share. It's just about extending that hand and really listening to them and creating that space. I thank you. I think firstly, thank you to everyone who brought in really interesting perspectives. I do want to go back to both Shantanu and Dr. Kim, who I did ruthlessly interrupt a little bit. So I do want to go back and hear if you want to share and summarize some of your thoughts that you weren't able to. Dr. Kim, maybe if you want to talk about the trigger rise example that you weren't able to, if you want to share a little bit about that. And Shantanu, if you want to talk a little bit about the Bangladesh case study that you were talking about. Happy to definitely listen to that. Yes. Dr. Kim, over to you.
Sure, thank you. And I really appreciate Saba's comment about building capacity of youth. I think that's really important. It's a give and get because we do want to understand their experience, but they're going to need capacity building as well to participate in the design, data collection, interpretation. And that's an important element to bring them along on it and give them tangible skills that they can leverage and use later. So I really love that. Thank you. And then, for Triggerize. So Triggerize is a digital platform, and it's called TICO, and it's another SIF funded program, and it's to improve youth access to sexual reproductive health services. And so they use TICO and they build in behavioral economics principles to nudge mobilizers who are at the community level, who are youth, and also the clients who are youth, to get the kinds of services that they need. So the platform is really around implementation and getting youth the things that they need. But at the same time, there's a lot of data in it. And so it has great monitoring information about coverage, about redemptions of vouchers, actually getting services. And another thing that I really appreciate is that the youth can evaluate the services that they get, so that we're not telling them what is youth friendly, they're telling us what is youth friendly. And I think that that's a really nice element to this project. It also allows for provider accountability so that they're accountable to providing good services. And it allows for implementation, decision making, and to, again, take the information that you're learning from this platform, this dynamic and rich information that's current, and then course correct. And then they display it in Tableau into engaging dashboards for their stakeholders as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dr. Kim. And I'm just seeing on chat that everyone really appreciates all of the examples and links that's coming through. So really, thank you for sharing that. Shantanu, do you want to summarize quickly, if in case there was anything left for you to share?
Nothing to summarize as such, but just to really echo what everybody's saying, that it isn't really just in the formative research space that we need to involve and participate with the youths. It's really across the board, across our evaluations. And I think another example from the Bangladesh study that I was talking about that really drives this point home, so to say, is when the researchers actually discovered the results of the evaluation, they found that the adolescent empowerment program didn't actually influence child marriages at all. Whereas the conditional incentive program, which delivered cooking oil on the condition of having unmarried girls between the ages of 15 to 17, was in fact successful in delaying child marriage. And again, this was the point where, to really understand why this was the case, they had to go back to the community. They had to go back to speaking to young girls to actually really understand what goes behind this decision to marry early, to marry late, and who actually makes that decision. And it was only through this conversation that they understand that it's actually the young girls themselves have no say at all in their marriage when it comes to their marriage. It's really just the parents making that decision. So an adolescent empowerment program, as useful as it may be across other fields, had no role to play really in influencing child marriages. Whereas this conditional incentive program was, because parents really talked about how they feel the pressure to marry their children off earlier, because as I mentioned earlier, dowries, or the price of dowry, increases as women increase in age. And so to really finish that, like cover that sooner, would mean more financial security for those families.
Wow, I think some really eye-opening insights, really, and good to hear and understand really what the lay of the land is, and really how different systems are trying to do different things, how research, how tools, mechanisms, multi-stakeholder players, funders, young people themselves can come together, and are already coming together and doing so much, and really trying to unpack the various things that we have to unpack. So with that, I would like to close this first panel that we have and move on to the next one. So thank you, Shantanu, Dr. Kim, Shailja, Sabha, and Abhinav for taking the time and joining us and sharing your perspectives. This is again a learning session for all of us, and so I hope everyone's, even the ones attending, are really finding this insightful. Please do continue to engage on chat and encourage others who are probably not speaking today. I'm sure there are insights that you have that you want to share as well. So do continue to ask and engage. With that, I think now that we've understood how systems, various players in the systems are looking at this, I do want to now talk a little bit to our on-ground practitioners and see what's really happening on the ground, and bring on our NGO partners to talk a little bit about some of their practices, some of their challenges, learnings, and recommendations that they have seen work through the work that they have done. So I would like to invite Tanvi Negi, Associate Director, Knowledge Hub from Quest Alliance, an NGO working in bridging the education and skills divide. Nilanjana Ghosh from CINI, Senior Program Manager from CINI, which is an organization working on improving health and nutrition outcomes for children. Dr. Anshuman Karol, leading local governance in participatory research in Asia, which is an organization working with citizens and institutions to enable equitable societies. And finally, Vijay Sai Pratap, co-founder and CEO, Gram Vani, an organization that enables communities to use tech to bring positive change. Thank you, Tanvi, Nilanjana, Dr. Anshuman, and Vijay for taking out the time today and joining us and sharing our perspectives with all of us today. Can I come to you, Tanvi, first? And just talk a little bit about how Quest Alliance has done this, and what has been your learnings there. So Quest Alliance has been one of the many organizations at the forefront of really ensuring that power of deciding on issues and outcomes for young people are given, the right of that, and the power is given to young people. Quest Alliance has always been on the forefront of that. So I'd like to call upon you, Tanvi, to really talk to some of Quest's work within this field. And can you share 3 specific ways in which you've seen this being translated on ground? Really just 3 ways in which, or examples that you want to share, and how it's been translated, and how others present here, other NGO partners present here can probably take some of those ways and inspirations in which has been done and really have some of those transferred into their programs or their approaches. So over to you, Tanvi.
Thanks, Yashi, and thanks again for inviting us to speak to this esteemed audience. I think echoing a lot of what the first panel spoke about, but I will also just want to add that for Quest, I think the whole aspect of participatory evaluation also comes from the idea of helping young learners build identities as self-learners with themselves, being able to kind of take more active engagement or role in actually deciding what they want to learn, how they want to learn, how they want to set a goal for themselves, and how they want to evaluate what they have learned through the process. So the specific examples that I will speak about today are actually all kind of aligned to building that self-learning identity. I think the first example I'm going to cite today is from our from our schools program. Um, we have been working with adolescent in secondary schools for about uh, more than 6 years actually. And one of the things that we have actually tried out first during COVID lockdown and started virtually was this introducing them to a hackathon and design process, which was really about introducing them to principles of design thinking, being able to look at the world around them and identify a problem that they would like to solve. So put them through a boot camp of how to think about solve solutions and how do you kind of go through the steps which are needed to arrive at a problem identification and then come working together to build a prototype that addresses the problem. We've now been able to do this virtually. We've also done it now in schools, working with them. Both experiences have been different. I think when we were able to do this virtually, learners were logging in from home, and parents were actually, and this was emergence from one of the researches that we had done. Parents were able to now see their children as problem solvers, be able to work, get feedback from their parents, probe more about what are the problems that they were facing at home, and then designing solutions for that. So I think the dynamic that it brought about and how the relationship between the parent and child changed was very interesting. And I think some of the solutions that kids came up with, right, saying, I think I'll just cite one or two examples where this group of girls had worked on saying that they had older grandparents at home who had trouble climbing stairs, and walking mobility was affected because of bad knees. So could they kind of actually design a simple wheelchair for them to kind of get around, which would make it accessible, be affordable as well. So I think from an empathy lens and also deciding what are the things that you're seeing around. The other, I think one of the interesting thing that emerged from this research that we did after this hackathon process was also the identity that the learner was able to develop for themselves as problem solvers. The other example that I wanted to kind of cite today was to do with digital storytelling. I think we had some conversations around that also. I think Kim was talking about this, how young people are more on are more technology friendly and savvy. I think we did a digital storytelling workshop with children in middle schools and who were Bal Sansad members, who were youth parliamentarians, and taught them some basic, did a boot camp with them again on how to use a simple mobile phone, smartphone with some amount of editing software. And actually, I tell a story that they would without the filter of, say, an adult reinterpreting things to them, or the meaning making process was something that youth, these very young kids, about 10 to 14-year-old, were actually undergoing. So again, that was an interesting example for us. I think the last example that I wanted to share was around, and again, this was COVID led to a lot of innovations, frankly. And I think the example that I'm going to use right now is digital, not digital, but comics. The using the comic panel to talk about issues that resonated with young people. We did this in Orissa as well with a group of students. So very interesting ways of narrating what they were thinking and feeling, whether it was about not having awareness of reproductive health or issues being taboo, or seeing gender-based discrimination in terms of how household work is distributed. Very interesting ways in which girls were able to kind of bring that forth to a series of 4 panels. I wanted to cite one more example, and I think just wrapping up with that. I think, and this is also related to a challenge, right? I think in one of our programs, as we complete different modules, we encourage children learners to kind of reflect on what they've learned. That using a simple thing called a growth chart. They're given a certain prompts, and then based on where they think they are in terms of their understanding, classify themselves as seed or sapling or tree. Now, this is something which is very difficult for kids to process because our education system doesn't really encourage that reflective practices as such currently, right? So I think when I speak about challenges, I do wanted to use this example a little bit about how for us we saw as more kids got more comfortable in using the growth chart, we actually saw a dip in terms of what I mean, that a higher percentage of children were actually putting themselves in the tree category initially, but as they got used to being more reflective, being a little more honest in terms of how they were analyzing themselves, more and more children were putting themselves in the seed or the sapling category. Now, if you look at pro data sense, it possibly meant that you were kind of lagging behind. So it's a much more slower process. It takes time, but I think in terms of it also means more listening, more prompts to be given, to cues to be given to young people to help them dig deeper. So yeah, so I think I'll just stop there and maybe and hand it back to you, Yashi.
Thank you, Tanvi. What was interesting for me personally to hear is how when we were talking about tech in the other panel and how that's important, really seeing that being exemplified and really being used in so many different ways, and really having young people being engaged and using those ways. That was really interesting to see. And I saw Nilanjana, you nodding and really just agreeing to most of what Tanvi was saying. So, Nilanjana, can I ask you to talk a little bit then about what have been two key learnings as you faced some challenges while being participatory in some of the approaches that you had in place? Can you talk about two really key learnings or challenges that you've had in the journey?
Thank you. Thank you, Yashi. Thank you, Dasra team. Yes, what Tanvi was saying, and I can definitely relate to that, because we are the grassroots players who are actually doing this whole implementation part, and we are taking the 10 to 19 community along with us in the journey. So first of all, what I like to mention here, the learning is that there's enough of this talking about that make it participatory and make people be part of it, but actually doing on the ground. So if you see the adolescent just as a recipient or the receiver of the information, that is not enough. So what we do, we take them as an equal partner in the entire development process. Starting from that what earlier speaker was talking about, starting from the designing of the project. I mean, what exactly we want to do. And this has been based on a learning for so many years. It's not that we were doing this from the beginning. It has evolved based on our learning, that we have realized that if we see them as a participant and just as a receiver, they don't own this in this process. So our design, our entire approach and design is based on equal participation, equal partnership with the adolescent, taking them as an enough knowledgeable citizen of the country, not as a participant, those who doesn't know much and they have come to just to grace this occasions or the meetings or something. So what we do exactly, that is one learning that we have realized that has to be happen. Otherwise, this changes, what exactly the changes the children want, the adolescent want, will not take place. And also another learning is that the context specific talking, because we come with kind of a notion and understanding, and we enter in a village, the whole context is simply different. So if we don't do the whatever tools, whatever methodology you design, it has to be contextualized. You might come up with some resources based on some learnings or some experimentation, but when you replicate those things in a different settings, it has to be contextualized. So like we, in our approach, in our method, we do a lot of PLA, we apply a lot of PLA techniques, because we have realized that whole set of data collection tools, all these registers and all these big things, actually is not meant for the children to fill up and do all these things. So what can be a simpler tools that they can easily understand and relate with their problem? And we are dealing with adolescent, teen to 19. This community is something very invisible in our development sector. In terms of, you talk about data, there is no data for teen to 19, believe it not. NFHS, DLHS, whatever secondary data source you talk about, where is the data for teen to 19? They are either hidden within children, or they are, whether, I don't know whether they also belong to the adult group or not. So we don't actually get any data for them. And we're talking about participation and empowerment model, which is a very process oriented work. You need to handhold them for a very longer term process. And children from different community are in a different level of understanding. When I'm working with an urban community children, they are receiving quality. I mean, it's better than maybe from the very, very rural pockets where I'm working, and maybe in the tribal pockets where I'm working. So I need to put a lot of effort based on the understanding level of the children, and it takes a lot of time. So I think a donor community also needs to understand this process-oriented work is so important when talking about this whole issue of participatory approach and an empowerment model and all these things. So, and we have an examples, like I was telling that, I don't know, should I carry on, or you want me to
If you could
stop?
quickly summarize in a minute the example that you want to talk about. Yeah.
So the examples are that we have tried out many things. That I was talking about social resource map that we do. Is the children who themselves sit around their village, they draw their maps, they themselves identify which of the houses are vulnerable, where the houses, if the children are out of schools or more irregular, where are the houses, there are repeated history of children being married early, or there are other instances that is happening. That is not what we are telling them. They themselves are identifying that, and that is being translated into a kind of an action point, where children are going with those action points to various decision-making platforms. And we train them, capacitate them so that all that village level decision-making platform, which a village level child protection committee or village level health nutrition committee. So we, we strengthen the agencies, the groups of that children, and they participate in different kind of platforms that are there, so that issues get highlighted and resolved. It doesn't stop with a plan, it also gets monitored, so that children know that their issues is being articulated in some actions. And this has happened where actually, the panchayat comes up with their planning process. I mean, Priya is there, they are the masters in governance, so they know. So they come up with their whole planning process, which we call the GPTP, Gram Panchayat Development Plan, where children's issues are getting incorporated. And we have seen change in the allocation of budget for children. And this has happened in some of our locations, the budget for children has increased. So this can happen. Yes, this can happen if you take children as equal partner in the entire process. And another example I want to set here, that we have recently done a participatory research with the children who belong to street. So we have identified some street children who are the champions, who have been trained enough by, research organization, and they have done a participatory, formative research, and their issues, they have been able to identify their issues from the street context, right. And they're speaking in the UN meeting. They are facing UN General Representative.
Sorry, Nilanjana, I'll have to
sorry.
There.
I mean, there are so many things to talk about.
No. I totally understand, and I would love for you to talk a little bit more about, it on chat as well, for sure. But I just want to also bring in Anshuman, like you mentioned, he's here, and just want to bring him in to talk a little bit about, the governance side of things. So how are we really connecting the dots when it comes to governance? When we're working with local government, how can we make those processes and systems? Are there any learnings or practices, actually promising practices that you have seen have worked to ensure that the local governance and the local community really speak to each other, and we have those really mechanisms really churning to make participatory approaches real, in that sense? Do you have maybe 3 promising practices, Anshuman, that you've seen from your work?
Thank you, Yashi, and thank you, Team Dasra, for this wonderful discussion. So, Yashi, I'm speaking from on behalf of our recent work. And when Nilanjana is talking about the governance thing, and you pose this question to how to connect these dots. So I think it is important, and Nilanjana mentioned about the GPDP thing. So in one of our program, we implemented in Rajasthan, in Banswara and Govindgarh, where we created an agency of young girls when they are actually demanding. They actually want to have. They understood through this intervention that how important is the menstrual hygiene and what are the various government programs and schemes actually providing them with the not only with the sanitary pads but also with the incinerators and toilets and everything in their schools. So when they understood this, they started. They come up as a Kishori groups, and they started communicating this to their gram panchayats. Now the issue with the gram panchayats is, especially in the areas of you go to Haryana, UP, Western UP or Rajasthan, that women participation in the gram panchayats is very less, and there is no space for them to actually speak about. So we have incorporated a concept of Mahila Panchayat, and we integrated these Kishori groups to the Mahila Sabhas, and through these Mahila Sabhas, they raise their voices about what are the issues and concerns about their menstrual health and hygiene and how they're actually grappling with. So it's not only they are understanding it uh, more scientifically and more what the kind of practices they older practices they have, but they're also started speaking to their children. And interestingly, we have found in 104 gram panchayats we are implementing this program, and we are very delighted when most of the male sarpanches, panchayat presidents are actually coming up and try to incorporate their voices in the GPTV plan. So that is where the change has happened, and they have made provisions for the not only for the pad vending machines but also for the incinerators, separate toilets, hand washing facilities, toilet such facilities, and all. So this is how it is actually the change happened when the dialogue is started happening. The other example I would like to share with you our recent work in Gurugram, where we in the urban informal settlements, we have actually engaged with the adolescent boys and girls to help them understand the facilities they are getting through adolescent friendly health clinics. And they never heard about this thing, that even the adolescent friendly health clinics exist in their and what kind of services these adolescent friendly health clinics are being provided. But so when they visited the nearby facilities, they found it like it is in the hospital near the gynae ward, or all the other ANC services and other things are also happening in that particular small room, which is called Mitrata Clinic or adolescent friendly health clinic. And when they came back and they discussed with us, so we told them that what is your vision of adolescent friendly health clinic and what do you want to be there. So through they did some visioning exercise, and they created their own facility on web, and then they engaged with the local chief medical officer, the
Right.
local government there, and they want to highlight this thing that we want this kind of facility. So it's not only about the programs and how these programs are being implemented, but how these programs can be actually adolescent friendly. So this is how when adolescents or any group, they are generating a data, they are generating an evidence through their engagement. And I must quote Sabha here when she talked about the experience that the youth is not experienced, so that's why they are not listened.
Yeah.
But we highlight the lived experience. So it's about the lived experience. It's not the age. It's not the
Right.
education. It's your lived experience which needs to be highlighted, which needs to be communicated to the authorities, to the governance, local governance institutions, or whatever be the program and implementing agencies, that should be highlighted and that should be listened to. So that kind of evidence, that kind of, so they created a manifesto. They talked about that. So these are the two examples. There are a lot of things I can speak about,
Yeah.
but okay. So
No, Dr. Manashaman, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I know we do have a lot of it's interesting, right? When and it's inspiring when you know you make a pioneering step towards changing certain systems and it works. So it's really inspiring to share that and also see that when you open up dialogues in rooms, change happens like you've just laid out. So I'm sure there are more stories. So please feel free to continue to share. And we, of course, this is just the first step. So we continue to talk and engage on this topic. Finally, I'd like to bring in our last panelist for today, Vijay. Can you share your top, I would say, we've heard learnings, challenges, practices. Can you share your recommendations on how we can make processes more accessible? How can we design tools in a way that is reversing the flow of information to enabling diverse categories of young people to be able to take greater ownership within their communities? Because that's what we're really hearing, right? In terms of how can we involve more diverse young people. So how do you think, what is your recommendation on how we can do that and make this more accessible for more young people to really engage? Vijay, over to you.
Thank you so much, Yashi, and thanks to the Dasra team for inviting us over. Indeed, a pleasure and a privilege to be on this wonderful and august panel. We've heard such wonderful insights, and we kind of relate to so much of what's been said in terms of the need for making youth and adolescents as part of the conversation, right? So ensuring that they are given a space where they can share their views, perspectives, thoughts, opinions, right, and be part of the broader narrative, be it in terms of individual level impact at the community level or the community level impact at a broader, access to social protection schemes, for example, or even at a policy level, where all these voices that act as very significant and important evidence that can be used for policy level conversations and change as well. Gramani never was or is, never intended to be a research sort of an organization. But a lot of the insights that we gather or gain are from the conversations that we enable through our platform, right? So conversations about topics that impact the communities, right? So, and as I said, using these voices from the individuals as evidence for policy level change. Now, our objective is fundamentally to provide relevant and appropriate technology-based tools, inclusive, participatory, easy to access tools and platforms for communities where they're able to subsequently contextualize it based on their own needs, and rather than try to fit it from a top-down sort of an approach, and rather than trying to make that assumption that one size would fit all, right? So, and these the results have been quite surprising for us and quite pleasantly surprising for us in the way it's almost like a pottery wheel. We just twist the wheel, we provide the mud, and we let them allow them to shape the communities, to shape that in the way that it fits them best, right? And because we do not know everything, we cannot understand the context, the challenges that every community faces within their own perspective, right? So just to give you a couple of examples, right? So Kahin and Kahin Baatein, a program which is focusing on sexuality and reproductive health, in collaboration with Kriya and Tashi. We've been operating it for the past 5-6 years now. It was a platform which was meant to be a community platform focusing on access to sexuality and reproductive health and addressing the information and awareness gaps. But very interestingly, the platform became a very, very powerful sort of an info line in some sense, right? So addressing thousands of questions of youth from across more than 20 plus states in the country, more than 40,000 users or youth from across these geographies who have asked questions, taboo questions, which otherwise they wouldn't have any other channel to ask on. Right. So, but this happened because the platform or the interface we provided was interactive. It was a safe space where people trusted the platform. They were able to listen to other people's views, perspectives. And that's how they built the trust and the confidence that this was a safe space for them. Secondly, a platform for persons with disabilities, right? So a platform which we thought would be largely an information dissemination platform, helping persons with disabilities with access to information on schemes, on programs, etc. But very surprisingly, the platform turned out to be a heavily user driven or a community driven platform. Today, in fact, we've touched more than 50,000 users. This is in collaboration with Enable India, operating both in Karnataka and in the Hindi speaking region. And close to 95% of the content is user generated, right? And the platform, or rather these spaces that we are creating through, which is although broadly tech enabled, helps us with a lot of concurrent monitoring, as in any of the programs that we're talking about, right? So any of the partners that we've been working with, when they implement this, their programs, and they're able to layer it with this community level platform or an interface to enable conversations within the community, it then helps us to listen to those voices, to understand feedback from the ground, constantly and dynamically change content, adapt it to the community's needs, enable those conversations which trigger very interesting perspectives and views, which then drive individual level action and even collective action at a community level, right? So fundamentally, what we are saying is that policies work, but for that, communities, in a democratic sort of a setup, communities need to demand for those policies. But if communities have to demand for those policies, youth, for in general, who we are keeping at the center of this whole conversation, they need to be better aware of these policies. They need to be better informed about what are the reasons for these inequalities that exist, right? And if this is not just about information that's provided to them, it's also about actionable information. And how does this actionable information happen? It happens only through conversations. And to provide for that safe space and inclusive space for these conversations, we provide these tools that people are able to trust and are also able to engage with. And the last point fundamentally is that now you provide information, enable conversations, ensure that it is trustworthy, ensure that it is actionable information. But all the knowledge, all the information that we are able to generate through the platform, how are we able to provide it back to the communities, to the youth, so that in a relatable format, in an understandable format, and they can use all this information as very powerful data or evidence for community level accountability measures, where they can question the local institutions, systems to improve better access to services, improve the quality of services fundamentally. And hence we've been working on this very fundamental structure of keeping youth at the center of this whole conversation, ensuring that they are provided with these tools, using very innovative formats like storytelling, like a recent program that we launched with UNICEF, it was called Pataka Sir Ki Pathshala, right? So basically creating a very humorous format of building life skills among the youth. And
sorry, Vijay, if you could just summarize in a minute. Sorry about that.
Absolutely. So as I said, what we have been working on is to ensure that create these community-driven platforms or safe spaces, ensure that they are provided with information that's actionable. 3, ensure that they are, the capacity building component that was very rightly highlighted by the speakers earlier as well. Ensure that they are provided with the relevant support systems so that they're able to understand data, they're able to use the data, and enable them to take action for the community's best benefit and also from their broader perspective, community perspective as well. So I think it's about creating those inclusive platforms, and which is what Gramvani has been doing with the Mobile Vani network of systems.
Thank you, Vijay. Really great insights, and especially personally really like the pottery wheel example that you gave. It really helps, really think of it in that manner. But with that, I think I'd also like to just close this panel and genuinely thank Tanvi, Dr. Anshuman, Vijay, and Nilanjana for sharing some of your practical on-ground insights and examples with us. And I really hope that everyone in the room learned something that they can take back and really apply into their programs as well. And with that, I think I would just like to, this session really comes to a close. And if I could just quickly highlight a few things that stood out for me personally, talking about, reaching young people where they are, really making them own the process, seeing it at all levels, not just at one level where we can just involve young people. It's about the lived experiences, it's not about the age that, that we should be consulting them. It's about actionable information and building capacities. It's about all of those things where each of us as different players in the space really need to step up and act on. So what we've really heard today is that there's an obvious need to be more participatory and collaborative. And I don't think there's any disagreement on that front. And there seems to be enough evidence and documentation from across the sector to show that when we include young people, when they're more engaged, when they are protagonists, programs can become more sustainable, effective, and grounded in young people's reality. And we've really seen that being exemplified truly through numerous examples by all of our speakers and how that can happen. However, having said that, it is understandable that different stakeholders are at different stages, on taking that step towards participatory approaches and being collaborative. And different models are relevant to different types of stakeholders that are there. And so we also recognize that there are challenges that were highlighted today, and we are far from overcoming them. But that should not be a barrier. We must take that first step in the right direction and really learn from each other like we did today. And because what's important is that we begin and learn and lean on each other to make it happen. So I think one key takeaway for me, and I hope for everyone in the room, has been that we need to take the first step in the right direction, and that's what really matters. So with that, we at 10 to 19, I would personally like to thank everyone as 10 to 19, all of our funders, our implementing partners, collaborating NGOs, all of our speakers today for taking the time out and really joining us and sharing your perspectives with us today. I would also like to apologize for all of the hard moderation that I did today. But thank you for being on time and really just sharing the wonderful insights that you did today. We really appreciate the time and the insights that you did share. We will share all of the resources, all of the number of resources that's come across today, because the idea is to really continue the conversation and keep the learning journey going for all of us. So we will share all of the resources and resource pack right after the session with everyone. Just stay really tuned on future conversations. Please follow Dasra on Instagram, on Twitter, and you can write to us with any feedback, any suggestions, any other session that you would like to know more about, or learning sessions that you would like us to host. You can write to us at 10 to 19 community@dasra.org. But with that, I think I would like to just conclude the session. Thanks to all of the attendees as well for all of your attentiveness and really just sticking through the 1.5 hours, listening and engaging on chat as well. Apologize, we couldn't take in live questions this time around, but we hope to continue to engage and continue to come together as a group and have meaningful discussions. We hope we were able to spark some meaningful discussion and thoughts that will spill over beyond the boundaries of this session. With that, thank you very much and have a rest of a lovely day. Thank you, everyone.